Welcome to Tokunbo. My name is Jola Naibi, and in this limited podcast series, I'll be having conversations with Nigerian storytellers living in the diaspora. We will talk about the stories they tell, the way the stories are told, the way the stories are received, and so much more. Welcome to Tokunbo. On today's episode of Tokunbo, we're going to be talking to someone who knows a thing about food, who writes about it, and who you will enjoy reading and also listening to our conversation. I'm going to be talking to Yemisi Aribisala, the author, essayist, painter, and also all-rounded person. Listen in. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's lovely to finally have a conversation with you. Anytime I think about you, I think about the fact that you tick several boxes when it comes to the creative space. So you're a writer, essayist, painter, food memoirist. Please, jump in and correct me if I'm being inaccurate in my descriptions. But for the purpose of our conversation today, I wanted to focus on you and the writing that you've done when it comes to documenting Nigerian food. Your first book, Longthroat Memoirs, presents a sumptuous menu of essays about Nigerian cuisine. And what I really enjoyed about it was the fact that you also did an appraisal of cultural politics and erotics of Nigerian food. So
I tried to.
I read somewhere that it wasn't like that you becoming a food writer was one of those happy accidents that we're so often thankful for. I'd like to hear it in your own words. What was the journey that led you to start writing about Nigerian cuisine?
Well, first of all, thanks for asking me. And it's nice to see face to face. Because we've been sort of chatting for years.
Yeah.
When you say happy accident, it's an interesting word. I've never inserted that word before in front of what happened. Because of my nervousness, so I was just at home, and I think I remember that I was pregnant with my daughter, my last child, and I got a phone call from Ebu Feludu. She used to be Olatoye, and I'm not I can't remember whether Jeremy was with her, Jeremy Wheat, who was at that time also second half of Cassava Republic Press.
Okay.
Or shall I say co-founder? Anyway, so Ebu and Jeremy asked me whether I would like to do restaurant reviews for 234 Next.
Okay.
I'm sure you remember 234 Next.
Yeah, the newspaper.
And I, of course, immediately I just said, I had two other children. So immediately the possibility of it was impossible for me to do that. So I said, it doesn't seem like something that I can do. And I don't think that I have the persona for it, because I think Tokini Peterside was already writing something at that time. And she struck me as the perfect person for the job, because she was very refined. She had, she was beautiful. She had the step into a restaurant looking very fresh thing about her, which, I was just the opposite. So I said, I don't think that this is possible, but let me think about it. I think what I might be able to offer is rather something on food and culture.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure what I was thinking at the time, but I just thought, because that might work. I think I did go away and think about it. So that's sort of the summary of how that happened. And then I started to write every Thursday. And for 2.5 years, I struggled, but I got something out. So that's like the basic story of how it happened.
And so now, most of what you wrote is what now was in the book Longthroat Memoirs.
Exactly.
That's why I said it's a happy accident, because I read.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So it was just, for me, you know how it is where somebody calls you up to do something that you feel you're 100% competent at doing, and you jump at it. That's how I define what you've just said. Happy, oh, lovely, but all the time, I mean, from beginning to the end, like I was always like thinking, ooh, you know, am I the right person for the job? So anyway, I cut you off. You were saying
No, you didn't. This is a conversation, so we'll be cutting ourselves up for the next hour. So, but I remember reading in another interview that you had said that because you didn't, I mean, when it comes to producing the book, you didn't have that pressure of I have to write a book. I have to write a book. It was easy to repurpose those essays into a book, as opposed to if you had set out on that journey and said that, okay, I'm writing these essays because I want to put them in a book. Am I correct in my interpretation?
I have to do a slight correction. So I think what I meant was not thinking of a book and just doing it piecemeal helped me to do it at all.
Okay.
So if I had said to myself, I'm going to sit down here and I'm going to write a book on Nigerian food, I would have talked myself out of it. So it wasn't that it helped to write, it helped to purpose it for a book, because just that book didn't come up at all until just almost at the end of, or let's say close to when 2, 3, 4 next was sort of just going to close down. But, yeah.
So tell me about that conversation, about how it became that let's put these essays in a book, and what was that process like for you? Because it's one of those books that we have a lot of fiction, nonfiction, but hardly anyone writes about Nigerian food, and I don't think I've discovered anyone who's written it quite the way you have.
But lots of people are writing now, by the way.
Now, but by the time, and we'll come, there's a point I would like to make during that conversation. But yes, so how did that happen? And would you say, was it easier process for you, pressure-wise?
It wasn't. I think also I was aware that those 800 words were shaky. So I think for me, again, because I'm doing it again, this time with not food, as you know, but like I'm doing paintings and writing for a collective of writers. It's happening. It's not happening as fast, but it's happening so quickly that I'm short circuiting. I'm just doing it.
Okay.
So every month I produce something, I push it out. But if I was going to put it into the form of a book, I would have to sit with it again. If I was rewriting, and that's what happened. So let's say we had, and over and above the essays we put into the book, we had a lot more essays. And so they had to be looked at. We sort of had to decide. So just first of all, I just put them together and said, oh, look, a book, and sent them off to Bibi Bakari Yusuf.
Okay.
And then we started to talk about how we were going to, which ones were going to work, which ones were not going to work. Then I wrote an introduction. That introduction changed the game entirely.
Okay.
Because it now created, because obviously you could have just taken the essays and just put them together and just published it. But the introduction took the standard, and I wasn't consciously doing it. It just raised the standard by 1,000%. And then the rest of the essays had to come up. So that was why, from the point of talking about that book till the publishing took a few more years. It didn't happen at all quickly. Lots of going over stuff, rewriting over and editing and so yeah.
And so, I mean, definitely you got would you say it was a baptism by fire of you got your hands dirty, you got that experience, which is invaluable, and it made you become one of the most sought after writers when it comes to writing Nigerian cuisine. And I guess I wanted to pivot a little bit and you know how we're Nigerian, we're Yoruba, we have that cultural awareness that we're writing for a global audience and trying to convey our culture. How would you say, how have you been able to do that and what are the unique aspects of the Nigerian cuisine that you feel are underrepresented or misunderstood outside of Nigeria, and which you have tried as much as you can, given the position that you hold, to debunk some of those myths?
Well, I think as a sort of starting point, I had a mindset. That mindset was, I don't believe there's a kind of impression. So there's a pinnacle, isn't there? There's which French cuisine is there, and then maybe Spanish. So if you're sort of just watching TV, for example, or you are consuming what we call global media, I don't know whether that's the correct word, you're on the internet or you're watching Food Network, then Nigerian food does not, it doesn't count. And so, but of course it counts for the person who is eating it. And this must be the case with every single cuisine in the world. It's not about how it's presented on social media or whatever. It is really what is happening in the background that counts. So I had that sort of, it wasn't patriotism. I don't really connect with that word. It was just that awareness that there was a misunderstanding and there was a disconnect. So how was I going to breach that? And, I was able to communicate because I'd written a few pieces and they weren't necessarily food pieces before that. So I had, as you would say, people who were already reading the stuff that I was writing, but stuff that was probably more gritty. That's the word one uses. So I just, I think the first step was to have that standpoint of, look here, your food isn't better. So we're sitting at the same level and then we're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to tell you what you don't know. And you don't have to agree, of course, because the point is that everybody's food is the best food. But you will learn something if you listen. And I think that it worked. I think that pride and the sort of stance, because I could have gone in with low self-esteem, I could have, but I just, and I really believed everything I was saying. I have a Guyanese aunt who's also a writer who says, I don't understand what the big deal is with Nigerian food. I said, but that's not the point. What is the big deal with any other cuisine? Think about it. The point is, it's your food. So everybody has, and the thing we never really did was do that portrayal and the song and dance and say, look, this is why we eat it. And so it's sort of a mixture of all of those things. I'm not sure whether I've answered the question, but...
Oh, you have. I mean, this is definitely, it's an opening point, because I see the point that you're making in terms of how the Nigerian cuisine and the way you write it, the way you present it, the pride that you have in it can act as a bridge between the different cultures. And if you don't stand as an ambassador of what you know, then other people will diminish it in terms of, and storytelling is an art form. There isn't just one way. And if you're telling the story of a culture through food, there is a power in it that helps you amplify the voices of people who have been marginalized historically. And I mean, it brings me to my next question, because you've been doing this now for a while. And from the time you started to now, have you seen that growing interest in Nigerian cuisine among non-Nigerians? Because another thing in that interview that I read is, you said somebody asked you to define, I think the interviewer asked you to define African cuisine or African food or something, and you said something like, there's no such thing. And even within the Nigerian culture, there is there's certain parts of Nigeria that I have never lived in, that I'm not aware of the culture, which I actually came to know of when I read your book. But I mean, going back to the question before I ramble off, what are some of the ways that you've seen that there has been a growing interest in Nigerian cuisine among non-Nigerians? And do you see your contribution to driving that interest?
Well, I think now, because how much writing am I doing really, or how much am I in the fore? So I would say that my influence is there, but there's a lot happening that has nothing to do with me. Yeah. And around about the time that I just wrote about this today because I sent off a piece to someone who was asking about Nigerian cookbooks. And I said around the time that I was doing the Food Matters, there's a lady called Ozo Soko, who was at that time, she had started her blog called Kitchen Butterfly. And I think there is such a huge body of work in there. I know that she's trying to publish her book because she mentioned it to me. And I expected that it would have come out before all the other books that have come out. But her blog in itself is fantastic. So that is, and there is a lot of sort of experimentation in it, yet it still keeps itself, because sometimes I find that people say, "Oh, I'm doing Nigerian food," but then they're doing other things. They're not, yeah. But so apart from other people, she's there. Lope Ario, as you know, wrote a book called Hibiscus. There's Africana by Lerato Uma Sheila. There's a new book that's coming out now. I can't remember the name of it, but there's just all of these people who are writing about it, and they probably have been for a while.
Yeah, but they're just getting visibility now.
I think that I'm not even really sure now what the driving force is, whether it's just everybody, because you see everybody talking about all the different cuisines. There's, it's all out there. There's a huge market, a huge demand, everybody's talking about, food from different countries. But maybe there was a time, this is 2024, maybe scale it back to maybe 2015, 2016, where there was not that much happening in the media. From that point on, things started to sort of just build very gradually. There are all kinds of restaurants now. There's Ikoyi, which, as you know, is like fine dining. So different, there are bookers there. So there's just so much now that has that's happening. And so all of those things have nothing to do with me. I'm aware of them. And perhaps, let's say at the very beginning, I was able to draw some kind of attention, but going forward, yeah.
No, but definitely do not diminish the great work that you did to bring Nigerian cuisine. I remember there's a line in your book where you said that if you Google Nigerian chefs, your cursor doesn't like. And I remember being struck by that. I actually read that line again this morning as I was preparing, because I had it underlined. And now that's not, what a difference.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, you had Hilda Bassi, who, at one point she won the Guinness Book of Records, and that, even though it was for cooking time, but the fact that she was cooking Nigerian meals, that had to bring a lot of visibility. And now, just for fun, I did Google Nigerian chefs, and I did come up with a few good, results.
Yeah, lots of, as in chefs now, not cooks.
Chefs, not cooks, chefs.
Professional chefs,
And the point I wanted to make bringing that up was that it's not like these people just started. This has always been something. Those of us who grew up in Nigeria remember Maggie Kitchen and the cooking shows, and they always were there. But outside of the Nigerian circuit, the global visibility wasn't there. And the lens that they deserved was not given. But people like you were able to break in with your book, with your essays and things like that. And I guess this is my way of thanking you.
Oh, thank you. I think the difference, what I realized was at the time that I was writing, perhaps after that, a lot of Nigerian chefs went off to places like Tokunbo, then came back and said, yes, I've been, but I'm a Nigerian chef. Perhaps the difference was going off and being trained professionally. Otherwise, all you are is a home cook, right? I think, so I don't think that they were there in that sense. They had to sort of agree to enter into this space where you learn how to do things a certain way so you can say, this is what I am.
Professional.
And then take it back and
And there is this iconic big photo of you sitting on a small bench close to the floor in front of a mortar and pestle with heels on. Please tell us, what's the story behind that photo?
So this mortar and pestle was a gift from a friend who was supposed to then teach me how to use it. And I wanted to, again, when I was taking that photograph, it was, I think, around that time when President Buhari had passed a comment, and someone, I think, had maybe asked him about his wife, and he said, oh, she belonged, or she'd said something and he was upset with her, and he said, oh, she belonged in the kitchen and in the bedroom. Do you remember something about that? And of course, Nigerian women were furious that what is he talking about?
Exactly.
And I remember thinking, it's funny, right? How you have men who are cooking in kitchens in London, in New York, in Paris. They're paying them incredible amounts of money. They're famous. They're celebrities. And at the same time, a woman who is in the kitchen somehow is diminished. How it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense anyway. So that was what it was, because I dressed some of my best jewelry I was wearing in that photo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
and I said, and I was making a point, which is there is this, I mean, part of the piece I just wrote was about this, how women in Calabar, there is a pride in cooking, and they are like superstars in their own right, in whatever community that you cannot look down on them. That cooking is the thing that gives them power. They're powerful. And that power cannot be diminished by you deciding that, I don't know. So that the picture was to convey, maybe to perhaps convey that power. Because there's a lot of power in nurturing people, because all these people that you're feeding, you could, God forbid, you could kill them.
Yes.
So how do you
have a lot on your hands?
Yeah. How do you eat from somebody's cooking and then say that person doesn't have power? You diminish them, or you decide doesn't make any sense. In any case, I think women who cook for their families are they're doing something that is incredibly important. I don't know how you can put it down.
And the other thing I wanted to just also bring out from your what you just said, and as part of our conversation, the fact that they attribute the cooking process to just women, and then you're expected to, as a woman, you're expected to cook. One of my friends who works in here as an attorney, she doesn't cook at all, because she's like, I go to court, I do a lot of work, I shouldn't be expected to feed. And so the cooking is done by her husband, who is a university lecturer. And so when you think about gender roles and the fact that, I like what someone said once, if you can eat, you should be able to cook. And it shouldn't be, whatever your gender is. And so going back to the picture, I didn't even know you had all of your best jewelry on. Now it's even more powerful, even without having that knowledge. Now the world knows. It's definitely a very powerful and empowering photo. You had mentioned the women in Calabar, and I saw a lot of the recipes and a lot of the writing that you had done in Longthroat Memoirs. It was clear that there's a lot of attention paid to details. And can you walk me through what the writing and research process was when it comes to documenting Nigerian recipes. In terms of ensuring the authenticity, I remember trying to teach my daughter something to cook something. I can't remember what it was, maybe more and more. And she was like, "You're not even measuring anything." I was like, "We measure with our eyes." And so then when I have friends who have cooked for, and they're like, "You need to send me the recipe," and I'm like, "Oh, you've just given me a headache because I don't have this thing was passed down to me from my mother who got it from her mother." And so how did that work out for you?
That's very interesting. Honestly, that's what I was just writing about having to approach women in Calabar to ask them for their recipe, you know. And I don't know how to explain the disdain. First of all, because you're a grown woman, you have children, they know you in the community, and you're coming to them. The way that you do it there has to be a way that you do it. When I got to Calabar, at the time I got to Calabar, you couldn't, you had to go to the market to get your chicken slaughtered. So not being able to do that or being afraid of that process, which I was, I had to be careful how I conveyed that. I could not go and say, I'm afraid to go to the market.
Okay.
Chicken slaughter. So I would, I had all of these tricks I was playing. But the point I'm trying to make is there was, it as you said it, I needed, so I wanted to know how to cook ogbono soup a particular way. I would have to find someone. That person would not then bring out their scale, and no, it wouldn't work that way. It would be the fact of even asking was a problem. Then going, because you would have to go turn up in their kitchen.
Yes.
In all humility, and you would have to watch, then you would have to translate it yourself, you would have to try it out. So a lot of the recipes in the book were not very well written. That was the failing of Longthroat Memoirs. The recipes were not. It was the sort of thing that if we thought about it and I had the money, I would have given it out to someone. I would have delegated it someone else to do that work, because I guess that's what people who write proper cookbooks do. But I wasn't writing a cookbook.
That's what I was going to say. So it wasn't written as a cookbook. In fact, I think the recipes would have just been an add-on, if anything, because with the essays. You shared about your experience in Calabar and having to ask, but what other memorable stories or experiences related to Nigerian food would you like to share?
Oh my goodness, I have so many. I don't know. Difficult to think of. I can't really think of. If you had said relation to something, so
in relation to, okay, well, I think for me, in relation to childbirth, especially since you started with telling us about how you started on this journey when you were expecting a child, what memorable stories related to Nigerian food? Did you have any particular?
There was, I had my son in First Consultant Hospital.
Okay, in Lagos.
In Lagos, and I remember being in the hospital, and I was so hungry, and that sort of hunger where just right after, and I was thinking, I don't want to eat bread. I don't want to eat. I want to eat, hospital food. I was just. My sister-in-law turned up with this flask. Inside the flask was this pepper soup.
Oh, yes.
Immediately she opened that flask up, there's just certain dishes like that. You just never forget it. Like, I'm just inside that flask as we're speaking.
I love it.
The goat meat, the yam, the spices. And after you eat it, everything just starts to flow, So, just wonderful stories like that. I will never forget. And for me, because my own people didn't turn up, she came up with that. My mom didn't turn up. My sisters didn't turn up. So, oh my goodness, I will never forget that flask of pepper soup.
That's as memorable as can be, as in you will never forget that flask of pepper soup. We're living in it. I love it. And what is the most surprising thing you've learned about Nigerian cuisine during your research and writing? What are some of the most surprising things?
For me, because there was always this push where it was, oh, it's not sophisticated. That really used to bug me. Because you would have to really travel, and I didn't even travel as much as I would have wanted to say it isn't. So I remember researching the pepper soup spices for the nsala. And going through the detail of each spice. That for me was one of my favorite parts of writing the book, and realizing that, a lot of thought was put into thinking about how this was going to come together and what its purpose was for nurturing the body. It wasn't haphazard. There's nothing haphazard about it. And when insala is cooked properly, there's a way that it really entices the senses. So for me, that's probably one of my favorite sort of research work into the book.
And I wonder how many other people go into that level of detail when it comes to research. It just brings to mind that we're so deeply embedded in our culture, and our culture is so oral that transferring it onto paper is just something that's really difficult. I told you about how, I have friends who'll be like, write me the recipe for this dish that you brought for the potluck. And I'm like, I can't, because it's just not something that I have written down. I mean, I've tried, but I always know that because I measure with my eyes. And I think this is the other thing that I wanted to ask in terms of how, and you can be completely honest here, how hard was it to do that when it comes to showcasing our food for the written word? It
was very difficult. It was each spice. So you would have a spice and it has different words in different languages.
Exactly.
And you sort of have to decide which is the most,
especially the spices. I know.
If I say it's in Yoruba, they'll be like, why did you use that word?
Exactly.
So, but someone who's done a very good job of this process we're talking about is Ikwo in her book. I'll remember the title. I've forgotten. But she calls herself Savory Queen.
Okay,
so she's on the internet, but she's got a fantastic book, beautifully photographed. I mean, this is like a book that will do well on any platform. And because she's someone who's done the cooking. You go online, you see her doing it. She's measured, and so she's good at it. She's done it. So it's not something that cannot be done. I think what my own part of it was actually not the pounds and ounces, the translation of how it tastes, how it feels, what you feel about it, all of
emotional attachment to it, what makes you feel.
Exactly. Which people hadn't bothered to do for whatever reason. That is still something that I'm still thinking about. Why? Because in the piece I was writing for someone, I was saying, look, we have Onisha market literature, we have Hausa market literature, we have Heinemann's, we have bodies of work that really tap into the culture, but for whatever reason, the food never came up. So
A lot of for the podcast series, I'm talking to a lot of writers who are writing from the diaspora, and one question that I ask all of them is, what do you miss most about Nigeria? And when they list out their thing, it could be a list of 3 or 4 things, but food is always the one common denominator in terms of, because yes, you can get jollof rice here. Yes, you can get moi moi. You can get all your, creature comforts, but it's just not the same as when it is back home.
Well, that's interesting because the food is the last thing I miss, because I can cook anything I want to eat. Okay, so sometimes I made some moi moi and I didn't make the moi moi from beans. I used split peas.
Okay.
You would not know, but of course there was no leaf.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but then I found that if you could cheat with the leaf I found. So I don't actually sit down thinking I miss the food, I miss the food, I miss the food.
Make it happen.
Exactly. Maybe because I can. But I miss things like the rain. That heavy rain? Yeah. My daughter says she hates the smell of rain. There's a word for it. I can't remember what the word is.
Petrichor.
But I actually love that, the heavy rain with the smell.
Yeah, I like it. When the rain raises the dust that has been dormant for a while. I wanted to go back to something that you said, which is interesting. And it's a question that I had in my head, but I didn't know that I had it until you said what you said about split pins. How often do you experiment with what we call fusion cuisine, that's combining Nigerian flavors with other culinary traditions? What examples do you have, and what kind of results have you had?
That's the thing. I'm not a fan of fusion Nigerian.
Got it.
But when I'm desperate, as in it is my desperation that drives me to do certain things. So I will do that thing in order to get sort of like the taste that I want. I remember that discussion with a friend. Well, how do you get the jollof rice to taste like you cooked it outside? Because you can't cook it outside. And she said, okay, so if you burn a little bit of nutmeg, burn it, then, so those are the kinds of experimentations that I do not really, that's not really fusion. That's just trying to
get the home cooked.
Scratch an itch, yeah.
And I remember reading the same interview that I've been referring to, where you said, where I think the interviewer asked you what it is that you don't cook or what you can't cook, and you said that you don't cook jollof rice like your sisters, and you wish you could, which I thought was an interesting take, because with jollof rice, it's either hit or miss. Yes.
Even now, I'm actually haggling. I'm probably going to see her in a bit. So I'm saying she forgot to bring my jollof rice.
Oh my goodness.
I can probably cook it, but it's just not the same. I don't know.
What is it about your sister's jollof rice that's
I have no idea. It just, or maybe it's a thing where it's like, it's a mindset now. But I just have never cooked my own jollof rice, and I thought, oh, this is really good.
No, because the reason, there's actually a personal reason I'm asking, because I cook jollof rice and I eat it, but it's like, okay, it's fine. But I have friends of my daughter and my daughter where they're like, oh, your jollof rice is the best. This, that.
Well, they're probably right.
But I don't see the big deal. So when I read that, I was like, maybe Yemisi is onto something here. How has the Nigerian diaspora community, how have they responded to your work, in terms of you being one of the pioneer writers of, showcasing Nigerian cuisine in the written word for a global reading audience? What have you been welcomed with open arms?
I think so. When I first started to write for 234 Next, people would come and say, what are you talking about? That's not. But it was Nigerians. That's actually, they like you. Yeah, that's what it means, that they're talking to you at all. So for me, the best part of this, and I tell people because sometimes they'll come and say, oh, write something. And I'm like, if that thing is going to isolate my people, that's the people that I'm really writing for, because I'm not writing for you people, I'm writing for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do it. Nigerians are my first audience.
Mm-hmm.
And they have always been generous. Even when they knew that the recipes I was writing was rubbish, they would still hail me, you know? So, no, me and my people were up there, and then the other people come after. So, not even the diaspora, Nigerians in Nigeria first, then the Nigerians in the diaspora, and then everyone else. Yeah.
And do you think that if you had to give advice to upcoming writers who are, because we've already talked about how the space is now becoming larger and wider and more people are getting involved, what advice would you give to aspiring writers who want to document and share the Nigerian cuisine for a global audience?
For me, the main issue I have is that, and I don't want to say this and discourage anybody, but don't come in on the jollof rice leg. Because it's already tired. And everyone's been excited about it. Everybody's celebrated it, but there has to be more, and there is more. So fusion is great. It's just that it's not my thing, but I think that it is great. I think food has to be experimental. It makes sense.
Yes, that is true.
But I think the most important thing is that you come with a lot of integrity. Don't come and be pretentious about it. Don't come and try to be someone you're not, or because you are really gunning for popularity, you start to, do and say things that are not true or real.
Misrepresenting the culture.
It's not even misrepresented. It's just, I think that what it does is your work will not last. It might cause everybody be excited about it, but you just find that people will push it to the back. And you don't want that. You want your words to be out there. And so whoever is coming should come with themselves and with a lot of, with the intention of sticking around, not just being a flash in the pan, but actually putting, so you find the people whose work, like Kitchen Butterfly, like Oko Suko, I'm mixing them. Uko have been doing this for years. So what you're seeing now is like an accumulation of years and years and years and years of work that they put in. So not just come and just do whatever and just leave. Really put something down that also, I think it's important to think about Nigerians, not the way that people group all of us and say we are all of this, but bring out, this is an opportunity to bring out what's good and to do it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing be authentic, be tenacious, and also be loyal to who the Nigerian people are, because it's so easy for them to put us in the same box when there is so much. One of the things there's so much more that we have to offer. One of the things that struck me about when I read Longthroat Memoirs was the fact that, and correct me if my interpretation of this is wrong, when it comes to Nigeria, the depth of Nigerian cuisine, it was only just scratching the surface. And the North was not even as strongly represented in the book. And this is not in any way like a poor reflection of the book, but it shows you that, this is a way of saying that you can't represent Nigerian culture or cuisine in one book. And
easily, there's just so much to it.
Exactly.
So much depth. Even if I wanted to just go to Benue that area, like the middle there,
Mm-hmm.
and just so there's just all kinds of parts that I didn't even address, not even only the north.
Mm.
Mm.
And when you think about your personal favorite Nigerian dish, what would that be and why?
That's an interesting question, actually. So which one do I don't think I have a favorite. When we lived in Calabar, I had afang was a thing, not
Mm.
only for me, for my son. So it always had to be like somewhere, and afang with spaghetti.
Afang with spaghetti. Oh, and you say you don't do fusion. That's an interesting one. That's an interesting
My
one.
son, you see, afang with fried yam. So afang was a thing, and cooking it was I loved cooking it because I would put everything out, and then I would do hours and hours on end, and I had special pots and all of that. So, but someone gave me some afang leaf in London, and oh my goodness. Okay, so now we're back to that thing where perhaps I am missing afang now because
Because can you
because
get
I
the
couldn't
afang you
find.
had in Calabar in London?
It had a very
What
strange
we're saying.
smell. I cooked the soup and then I couldn't eat it because it had a very, very, very odd smell. And I suppose maybe it had traveled very badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
But if you could cook only one Nigerian meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's a very interesting question. Wow. I don't know. I can't say one.
Yeah.
I love my okra.
Okay.
And it's handy. So maybe okra with prawns and shiitakes.
Okay.
Maybe.
Do you know one thing that I learned from you now is because since I read your book how many years ago, and when I discovered it, I can't cook beans without putting balsamic vinegar now, and that was thanks to you. So that's another thing I have to thank you for. What are you doing now? What are some of your upcoming projects? And is it connected to Nigerian cuisine? Because like I said at the beginning of our conversation, you have so many hats that you wear.
I'm actually trying to write a second book.
Oh, good.
And finally, because for all sorts of reasons, I couldn't. So that is in the works. And then there's something else about art, about our Nigerian art and using them as doors and windows to run away. So those are the two projects that I sent something to my agent to have a discussion about. So hopefully.
And we've talked about the fact that, we're going to definitely look out for your book and waiting for it with, excitement. But we talked about the fact that you opened the door to sharing the Nigerian story through food. And how do you see the future? So looking back in 2016, when your book was first released, and there was a point where you couldn't even Google Nigerian chef and come up with anything meaningful, but we've crossed that bridge now. And what do you think the future holds for us?
I think that people will, in terms of Nigerian food in the diaspora, I don't know what will happen in Nigeria. I think Nigerians, maybe Nigerians are more like me, where I like my food to be quite traditional. And the tweaking doesn't tweak very far. It just it just moves a little out of the box. I think it'll be different in London, for example, where I live. There'll probably be a lot more experimentation. There'll be a lot of in order to get to that point where people are coming in and sitting in front of it and paying a lot of money to eat it. That makes sense to me. I might not go and eat it, but I will enjoy looking at it and all that. So I think that Nigerian food will definitely become more popular, and in the sense that it will be cooked in a way that the people who live in communities all over the world will be able to eat it and And that's already happening. You're seeing people with bowls of fufu and soup on TikTok. Going, oh, this is so lovely. This is lovely food. And so, wonderful. Yeah.
There is this YouTube channel that I don't know if you've discovered it yet. It's DJ Abbas, and he goes around London and he goes to Nigerian restaurants. And one of the things he asks the owners of Nigerian restaurants in London, because they're parts of London that they're mini Lagos communities. And you guys are so lucky to have that, I have to say. And he asked the restaurant owners, who are your customers? Is it just Nigerians? And they're like, no, that we have a lot of people who come here, and it's either they have some connection to Nigeria, either through family or having lived there, but they're craving the food and they're using their hands to eat the fufu. And that just shows you how global our food has become. And on that note, I wanted to ask you that if you were to recommend to somebody who had never had Nigerian cuisine ever, and it's not Nigerian, obviously, what would you recommend that they start with?
Probably jollof rice. No, honestly, for whatever reason, even my daughter goes to school around here, and her friends are like, "Oh," he said, "We're going to give us jollof rice." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to give you the jollof rice. I'll be begging my sister for 6 months. No." But her teacher loves jollof rice, so jollof rice is a thing. It's and I guess maybe in London they've learned how to cook it and not over pepper it. So I definitely would say jollof rice is the foods to go in on.
That's a good one. And a lot of people, when they think about Nigerian food, it's always jollof rice first. But then the other thing that we also want to make them know, just because it's so easy for them to just put us in that box, there's more to Nigerian food than jollof rice. And we're coming to the end of our conversation. And I just wanted to ask if you have any final remarks for our listeners when it comes to, telling Nigerian stories through food on the global scale.
For me, I just want to read more of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more of our stuff out there, written well, with lots of power. Yes.
And giving it the honor and glory that it deserves, right? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Aribisala. This has been such a joyful conversation, and we look forward to reading your book and also your essays wherever they appear.
Thank you. It's been lovely to speak. Really lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love the way Yemisi ended our conversation with a call to action. If you want, I want to see more, I want to read more. And it's just so empowering the way that she opened the door for so many storytellers to tell our stories through the food and through just understanding where we come from through our cuisine. I really hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed recording it. On the next episode of Tokunbo.
Because one thing with living outside the country does that to you. You realize that, this little divisions and ethnicities and all of that, it doesn't mean anything when you're outside the country. They still call you a Nigerian.
Yes.
It's when you go back to Nigeria that you begin to talk about, I'm from the north, I'm from the south.
Yes.
But when you're in America, you're just a Nigerian. And this is happening. When they ask you, this is happening in your country, they're killing the environment there. You don't say, I don't care because I'm not from the Niger Delta.
Yeah.
You can't say that,